Hello, welcome to Red Book Joy. Today I'm finally reviewing Mansfield Park, which was one of my Jane Austen July books. I finished it this week and I'm going to talk about how I annotated for the first time. If you're new to the channel, I'm Jack. If you're not new, welcome back to my channel, and you will know that I have been reading Mansfield Park since the start of July, if you've been here for some time. And yes, it has been a slow read for me, but for a number of reasons, which I can chat about in a bit. But Mansfield Park is a book that I have tried to read in the past, and I picked it for Jane Austen July because I want to finish all of Jane Austen's big six novels, the complete full-length novels that she finished in her lifetime. And Mansfield Park and Northanger Abbey were the two that I hadn't finished. Northanger Abbey I don't think I'd ever even started, and I finished that and loved it, and I've got a review for that which I will put a card up for, or put a link in the description box. Mansfield Park, however, was one that I read about a third of within the last 10 years. Can't even remember when it was. Just didn't like it. I was bored, I admit it, I didn't like it. But the older I get, the more into Jane Austen as an author I am. She's the sort of author who rewards you reading her and rereading her and reading her at different stages of your life, and you always get something different from her work. So I was determined to try and read and finish Mansfield Park. So I did think as well it was a perfect opportunity for me to try something I've wanted to try for some time, and that is annotating. I follow some amazing bookstagrammers who I've talked about before on this channel, and I will link in the description box to their Instagram accounts, who annotate as they read. They annotate the classics and they read with such intention and such thoughtfulness. They get so much out of these books. I'm like, I want that. I want to get that much out of these books because, yes, I completely agree that books should also be read. Classics are novels and fiction, and they should be read as such and enjoyed as such. But I want to be able to read a text like this and take as much from it as I can. And I really enjoyed reading Mansfield Park that way, I have to say. I don't think I'd have got through it or enjoyed it or taken as much from it if I hadn't done that. So Mansfield Park, I'll talk about my annotation process at the end. Let's just talk about Mansfield Park for a bit. So Mansfield Park is the story of Fanny Price, who is a poor relation to Sir Thomas Bertram and Lady Bertram, who live in the eponymous Mansfield Park. So it's a big estate in the country in Northamptonshire. Fanny Price is Lady Bertram's niece. Lady Bertram's family weren't very well off, but Lady Bertram was very good looking, so she, in typical Jane Austen fashion, we hear from the very start how marriage can affect the outcome of a woman's life, her whole future. There are three sisters at the start, so I can't remember what their maiden name is, but Lady Bertram, who is so beautiful that even so she doesn't have a fortune, she marries Sir Thomas Bertram of Mansfield Park, so she makes a really eligible match. She's punching above her weight, as we would say in modern day parlance, like in terms of her the fact that she's not from a rich family, and she marries into this very rich family, becomes Lady Bertram. Her other sister becomes the wife of a clergyman, Mrs. Norris, and they have the living on Mansfield Park, so he is the clergyman, the parson of Mansfield Park. And then the third sister, who is apparently equally as beautiful as Lady Bertram, decides to marry someone who is a drinker and not very well off. So she marries poorly, and that results in a very small house in Portsmouth in fairly squalid conditions, I imagine. Not squalid because they're still gentry, but living on very little money, and she ends up having 10 children. So it's decided by Mrs. Norris and Lady Bertram to take in one of the children to raise, and that is Fanny Price. So Fanny is brought to Mansfield Park when she is about 10, I think she's about 10 years old, 11 maybe, and she is raised with her cousins. There are 4 Bertram children, 2 girls and 2 boys. The eldest son, Thomas, named after his father, grows up to be quite a good time, a party boy, basically. He loves to go out and have fun and drink and go to the theatre. He doesn't really take life very seriously, and he's the heir to Mansfield Park. The second son, Edmund, is quite serious very respectable. He wants to be a clergyman, and Fanny and Edmund grow up. Actually, he is the kindest person to her at Mansfield Park. So they grow up and develop. The two cousins are very good friends. And then the two sisters, very beautiful, very vain, and we see as the story goes on the sort of decisions that they make in relation to their marriages, their futures, the flirtations they have, all the impact of all these things on women at that time. It's a really interesting book. I found the topic of, as always, marriage and the importance of it to women of that period, because it literally was how they survived. And the other interesting part of it, I thought, was actually how the effects of marriage or the effects of money on men, because that's raised a little bit in here, because Edmund, as a second son of a gentleman, has to have a profession. Even though his father is really rich, it's only one son who will inherit, and that is the eldest. So Edmund Bertram has to have a profession, and he chooses to become a clergyman because he's devout and he actually wants to be a clergyman. He has an ambition to be a clergyman. So that's the kind of setup. Aunt Norris, who is a really interesting character, she's foul. I think she's a really foul character. We see through her, she is was married to the parson who had the living in Mansfield Park, and early on in the book, it's not too much of a spoiler, but he passes away. So she's then living on her own in a house not far from Mansfield Park, but spends her life daily up at Mansfield Park with her richer relations, and does as much as she can to basically live off of them. So she's there to be fed, she's there for dinners, she anything she wants to do, she proposes that they all do it. So things that might cost her money don't cost her money, you know, taking a carriage ride out here, she's like, oh, why don't we all go on the carriage, and then they take their carriage and things like that. But she's having to economise because she's a widow, and she's a widow of someone who wasn't very rich. So in that sense, you can completely understand why she is the way she is. But then she's an absolute bully to Fanny Price. She resents anything that is given to Fanny. She is hugely abusive, actually. I find her really, at certain points, I was trying to figure out why she resented so much everything that was given to Fanny. So we come back to Fanny Price herself. As a character, I did feel for her situation, because she is continually told that she is not an equal to anyone in that house. She is not brought up to the same standard as the other children. She's expected to be grateful for everything, and she is, but she's sort of never completely at home there. She's never respected, she's never thought of in that way, and she has to continually put up with her Aunt Norris's behaviour towards her, which in some ways I always think is sparked by jealousy. I'm not sure, but you would think that Aunt Norris, being in the financial position that she is in, would have more sympathy for someone like Fanny, but she doesn't. Fanny Price herself, though, I have to say, is not my favourite Jane Austen character. Whilst I enjoyed this book, I have to say it will rank as I'm going to do a ranking of Jane Austen books, and this is not going to rank any higher than 6th place for me, because I didn't like Fanny Price. At certain points I was cheering for her when she decided to stand up for herself. And I'm going to go into spoilers now, because I can't really talk about this without spoiling it. If you don't want spoilers for Mansfield Park, look away now. Here we go. Yes, Fanny's insistence at standing up for herself. So as we know, if you're watching this, I'm assuming you've read it, Fanny Price gets a proposal of marriage from Henry Crawford. The Crawfords are an interesting pair. Mary and Henry Crawford come into Mansfield Park and just upset the whole apple cart of all of the Bertrams. So Mary Crawford is a very beautiful, very vivacious character who comes in. She likes to tease, she likes to flirt. Edmund Bertram, who by this point Fanny has fallen in love with, and it's her first cousin, which in Modern Sensibilities, yes, it's gross, but this were the times that they were in. She's fallen in love with her first cousin. He is always looking out for her and making sure, he's the only one who looks out for her, who makes sure she's okay, who makes sure she gets to go out for her. She has to take exercise for her health, and he's the only one who thinks about her in any way. And every other character in this, they're just so selfish and they ignore all of Fanny's needs. But she just doesn't stand up for herself. She doesn't speak up for herself. She just thinks she deserves it, I think, in some ways. Like she's, just... At certain points, at some time when she did stand up for herself, I was cheering, actually, because it's like, oh, good, you've grown a bit of a backbone. But she's also got trauma. She was ripped away from her family when she was very young. She's brought to this place where lots of people aren't very nice to her. She's been raised to think she's not good enough. So I can understand that that is the way that she thinks of herself. I can understand that. But it didn't mean I had to like it, and it didn't mean I had to enjoy that kind of behaviour and that kind of heroine from Jane Austen. Edmund Bertram, though, I want to talk about a bit. I didn't like him at all. He falls in love with Mary Crawford, even though Fanny is in love with him. So for a lot of the book, she has to listen to him going on about Mary as if she's brilliant, after he's got all these high morals and Mary hasn't, and it's quite clear to Fanny that she hasn't, and she's not this person she purports to be. And Edmund just falls in love with her and doesn't seem to care. Then we've got Henry that doesn't seem to care, doesn't seem to understand the kind of person that she is, or just blindly, willfully ignores the kind of person that she is because he is in love with her. And he says he won't have anyone else but her, and he wants to marry her, and all of these things. And then Henry Crawford, what an interesting character, flirting with both the Miss Bertrams, so Fanny Price's cousins, one of whom is already engaged, causes a huge scandal because he flirts with them, and he knows that Maria Bertram is engaged but still continues to flirt with her. What a villain. And then Julia Bertram falls in love with him. She's eligible, she's available, and he's like, no, I'm gonna make you jealous and flirt with your engaged sister. And then he just causes this whole ructions, and Fanny witnesses this behaviour and thinks, what an absolute pig he is, and she's quite right. Then he decides, I'm going to make Fanny Price fall in love with me, and he actually says it, which is interesting. It's kind of very much Dangerous Liaisons kind of conversation between Henry Crawford and Mary Crawford, which she reveals herself to be just as bad as him. He says, I can't stand the fact that Fanny Price, because by this point she's thinking he's not a nice person, I'm not going to be nice to him, and she's pretty much ignoring him and cutting him off and not being nice because she knows he's not a good person. And he's like, I can't have this, I can't have a woman not be in love with me, I'm going to make her fall in love with me. And in the process falls in love with her himself. But Mary Crawford, who knows he's going to do this to Fanny, is just like, all right then, like, these people are despicable. So this is going on. Then Henry Crawford falls in love with Fanny Price, proposes to her, expects to be accepted. And this is the thing, she doesn't accept him. Now, I've gone back and forth on this. Do I admire her for not accepting him? In a way, yes, she didn't like him. But if we think back at the time this was set and her position that she's in, and she's been continually told by her cousin Edmund, who was really irritating me, how amazing Mary is and how in love with her he is. And this poor girl has to sit there listening to this all the time, knowing full well Mary's not nice, knowing that she's in love with her cousin, she's having to listen to all of this. Then she's also having to be practically a servant in the house, like a governess or a companion for her aunt or whatever. She's like treated just a bit better than the servants, really. So she's got no future to contend with, and this man, this eligible man, proposes to her, and she turns him down. But how realistic is that? Because the whole way through, she's being told she's not good enough. She's being told. So to me, I could get on board I just found it very contradictory. I could get on board with the whole thing if we were told that, I know she's got this huge moral compass that is guiding her, which is why Edmund really likes her. I think she's one of Jane Austen's favourite characters, but I just didn't get it. If you've got the will of iron to stand up to refuse a man who's eligible like that, to refuse the situation in life which he would have given her, a very comfortable situation in life, to then have your uncle completely rake you over the coals for it and refuse him, to continue to refuse no matter how much the aunts are telling her she should do it, Mary Crawford's telling her she should do it, even Edmund's trying to persuade her to do it, and she still doesn't do it. It just didn't ring true for everything else we know about her character. So unfortunately, the one redeeming quality in her, which was that she did stand up for herself when it really mattered, I didn't think rang true for the rest of her character. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I know people love Mansfield Park, so if you think I'm completely wrong on that, we can have a chat about it in the comments. I'm not saying I didn't, and like I said, I enjoyed Mansfield Park, but this is why it's my least favourite Jane Austen book, because I rooted for Fanny sometimes, but the majority of the time, no, she didn't. Frustrated me, it really frustrated me. And Edmund, I didn't like. I don't like Edmund as her sort of leading man, as a love interest. He's very sanctimonious, which he would be as a clergyman, but he's continually holding Fanny up to this kind of ideal, this moral ideal, which may be the influence on her over why she wouldn't give in to Henry. But regardless of that, he's continually holding her up as this paragon, and then telling her that he's never going to love anyone but Mary, that he'll love her his whole life, and all of these things. And then eventually, when he really sees through Mary, and he only sees through her when he realises that when Henry Crawford runs off with Maria Bertram, who by this point is Mrs. Rushworth, who's got married, and she doesn't see it as so shocking, then he's like, oh, hang on a minute, you are immoral. You aren't the moral person I thought you were. And he's really hurt by it. And eventually he's like, oh yeah, Fanny, she's all right, isn't she? Oh, she could be a wife. She could be the wife I'm looking for. No, this was not, to me, whilst she got her way, she got the person she was in love with, it was all very icky, because all the way through he's calling her his sister, he's treating her like she's like his close friend, his sister, his cousin, whatever, and then suddenly, because the woman that he continually told Fanny he was in love with, even though she's this ridiculous character who is everything that he purports to not like about, women, and he even defends her when he sees her behaviour in London. He's like, oh, it must be the influence of her friends. He's like, no, you are doing that thing where you're just making excuses because you are just blinded by this woman's beauty, her flirtatious manner, I don't know what. And yet at the end, then he gives in, he marries Fanny. To me, he was settling. It worked out well for her. It all worked out in the end. I was racing through to see how it ended, because it was a bit hit and miss. Do you know how I would have liked it to end? I was really disappointed that Henry Crawford turned out to not have been reformed. What I think would have been a better book, far better ending for me, would be Henry Crawford turned out to not be this villain, that he actually was reformed by Fanny's treatment of him, by her example to him, that he actually decided, do you know what have I done? I've been this awful person, this virtuous girl who he was completely head over heels in love with. If that had changed him as a person, and then she'd married Henry Crawford, I would have been more satisfied with that. That would have been my perfect ending for me. So I wanted to annotate, and I looked up a lot of videos on YouTube, on Instagram, about what people did and how they did it, because I'm a little bit extra. You don't have to look things up. Annotating should be as personal to you, right? So what you want to underline, what you think is important, that kind of thing. So what I did look at, there were some videos, and all they talked about was the stationery they used, and I was like, yeah, that's important, and I do like a bit of a stationery chat, but I want to know why you've got that. What is that for? Is it important? So I got myself a few things that I thought might be important. I wanted to get different coloured pens for underlining, because I thought that might be useful. So if I'm going to colour code my different things, different themes, I'm going to get a different colour pen. So I got one of those pens that's got the 4 different changing colours, because I thought I don't want to be carrying 4 pens around with me, because that's the other thing that put me off annotating, is carrying stuff around with you to do it. So I got myself some nice coloured tabs, some post-it notes. I got myself a pen which had 4 interchangeable colours, and I started trying to deciding what I wanted to annotate, and I had a look on some things. And so the things I decided to look at, I wanted to underline quotes that I liked. So I thought, you know what, just quotes that I liked, not necessarily that there was any reason for me underlining it other than I enjoyed it. I thought I'd underline those in green. Then I thought I wanted to underline stuff to do with the characters and their relationships, so I did that in pink. Then I thought about themes. So I thought, when I think about what the themes are, if themes are emerging, I'm going to start underlining stuff like that in blue. So I put themes as they emerge in blue. Then I thought I'll use some symbols. So any vocabulary I wanted to look up, I would circle, and then anything that I thought was important to the story, to the themes, to the text, anything I wanted to remember really, I would put a star by it. And then I thought anything I wanted to research later or that I had questions about, I'd put a little question mark by so I could come back to it. And initially I started out by everything that I sort of underlined, I'd put a little matching coloured tab in, but that quickly became ridiculous. So I stopped doing that and started just putting tabs in on things that I thought I would like to at some point come back to, because I've underlined a lot, but some of it wasn't necessarily hugely important. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to tab the parts that I want to eventually come back to. And I matched the tab colour to whether it was a character, so pink, character information, or blue for one of the themes, or green just because I wanted to come back to it or remember it. And then occasionally, so then I would write in the margins as well. And occasionally I would feel the need to write on a post-it note. So I started out doing all these things and then thought I'll adjust as I go along to decide whether this is the way I want to do it, whether I need to do something else to keep my notes. And actually that system really worked for me. I've got post-it notes on the bits that I had real thoughts about. I wrote those thoughts on post-it notes and I stuck those in as well. The other thing is, some people are like, oh, tabs must be really annoying to keep to read with. So I made sure I didn't let my tabs stick out too far. So the tabs didn't have to be next to the particular piece of writing. They just had to be on the page and not stuck out too far. And then I had my coloured highlighting or underlining to show me what I actually was trying to remember. I started doing my own family tree or character page as things were going along to try and keep track. That was really useful, and I tell you why it was useful for me, because I started reading Mansfield Park and I had it as part of a read along, and what I discovered was, what happened to me was I had a family thing and I didn't read much for about a week, and when I came back to it I'm like, who is this person? I don't know who Mr. Yates is, but luckily I had my character map that I'd put in at the start. So that's how I did it. And yeah, I am going to do it again. If you want me to do a proper video on annotating, or do a vlog the next time I am annotating anything, let me know in the comments. And if you annotate, how do you do it? Have you got any tips for me? And Mansfield Park, do you agree with me on Mansfield Park? So my cat's decided to scratch the back of my sofa. Wait, come on, off, no, come on, come on. He never wants to be in a video. I really wish I could get him into a video. He's lovely. But anyway, so if you've read Mansfield Park and you completely disagree with me on all of it, I did like it. I don't often give star ratings on here. I do star rate my books on Goodreads, but that's just for my personal record because I forget books and what I think of them. But this is a 3-star book for me, which is good. Okay, Northanger Abbey is a 4-star book, for example, and I loved Northanger Abbey, so that is not a bad book. I enjoyed Mansfield Park. I enjoyed Austen's portraits of particular characters, the odious Mrs. Norris, Mary Crawford and Henry Crawford. I found fascinating characters. Just the protagonist, I just couldn't get her. Like, I was trying to think, well, no, she's traumatized, no, she's had this terrible upbringing, she's had to constantly kowtow to everyone, that's why she's like that. But then she stands up for herself and something as important as marriage to someone who is wealthy and eligible, and someone at a match that she can never have got, and she doesn't bow to pressure from anybody over that. So anyway, it all confused me a bit. Whilst I admire her for that, it was like, that's not in keeping with her character. I didn't think so anyway. So yes, let me know in the comments what you think of Mansfield Park, what you thought of annotating, and whether you'd like to annotate and give it a go. And hopefully I will see you again here soon. Bye.